Table Talks. This is your host, Mershawn Hargrave, and I am excited to dive into today's conversation. As I teased on my last solo episode, we talked about reflecting back on the year from a macro level. So, like, when I think about macro and micro, it was like macro, like, how did I feel? Like, not specifics, but what are actions I took and things that I did that made me feel good, and kind of reflecting back in 2024, like how, kind of connecting to what my word of the year was. How do I think I did? And so that was that episode. Now, this episode is going to be getting into the micro level. And so, what I wanted to do with this episode was take a look at the KPIs that I tracked ish throughout the year. I'll get into that. Um, but and taking a look at the KPIs that I tracked and how do I feel they went. Some were great, some were not so great, and how can I use that to propel myself into goals for next year. So, um, so I'm going to be talking about KPIs, where I was for each of them, and if you tracked these KPIs, different KPIs, you can um, use this as a chance to reflect back on yours, and then kind of what actions am I going to do with each of those, my thought processes around each of the KPIs. If you have never tracked KPIs, disclaimer, KPI stands for key performance indicator. It's really just jargon for like the data. I did an episode a while ago called Data Not Drama, and it really is talking about taking the data that you can learn from your business and how to take that into your next action steps. So, um, KPIs are a great place to start. They don't have to be overly complicated. As I say it with like the CRM video, dog, I just fed you. Leave me alone. Um, in the CRM episode, the place I tell people to always start with a CRM is an Excel spreadsheet. It does not have to be difficult. And a lot of these numbers I actually tracked, if they weren't in like the app itself, I tracked in Excel because it's just easy to use. It's easy to open a Google Sheet and just put the numbers in there and add to them every day. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's start here. The first thing I want us all to say together is the word should. So on the count of three, we're all going to say should. One, two, three, should. Okay, we have hit our should quota for the day. It is gone. You can no longer use that word when you're examining your KPIs, when you're taking a look at your business overall. We are looking at this through a lens of learning, not judging. I talk a lot about how we are in our Thomas Edison era. If you did listen to my last solo episode, apparently I didn't pick up on this, but my dad did. He called me. He's like, "It's Thomas Edison, not Thomas Jefferson." um, so I may have watched a little too much Hamilton, and Thomas Jefferson tends to be the name that comes up in my brain without me realizing. So we are in our Thomas Edison era. And so we are doing things and tracking them and seeing if they work and being very accepting of the ones that didn't. I will talk through some of the things that didn't work for me this year. I talk a lot about the messy middle, which includes finding the ways that it doesn't work. So, as we are going through this exercise, I say this for myself, I say this for you, as you're reflecting back on your year and what you did and did not do, and what did and did not work in your business is no shame. There is no shame in any of this. If anybody had a blueprint for exactly what you needed to do to grow your business in the way that you could, they would be a billionaire, because it's not that simple. Even as someone who is selling a course on how to sell, like, it's not straightforward. It's not the exact same for everybody. So there are going to be things that I do in my business that don't resonate with you and you're going to do differently. And that is okay, but you have to find out what your different is. Um okay. So, I think the easiest place to start, it is probably the most trackable. Everybody can open up their app and figure out what this number is, and it is um really, at the end of the day, it's the ultimate goal, I think, because um we live in a capitalist society. And so the first KPI is revenue generated. And so how much revenue did your business generate? Um, you can also swap this, not swap it, but like take it one step further. And how much profit did your business bring in? So, um, profit is revenue minus um, costs. So if or expenses. So if you bring in $200,000 and it costs you $75,000 to run your business because of payroll, or if you have a product based business, you have to make the products, or, for me, it's things like Zoom, it's things like your website, it's things like coaches, like all of the things that you buy or pay for to run your business are expenses. And so profit is revenue minus expenses is the profit. Revenue is a great place to start, especially early on, because typically a lot of people don't, when you're trying to bootstrap your business, you're trying to keep costs as low as possible. When you're starting to scale, that's when you start to think about, you know, your expenses vary a little bit, but obviously, profit is a great place to start. Revenue, if your expenses are relatively low, then revenue is a great, always a great place to start. I just rambled on way too long about expenses versus profit. Anyways, so how much money did your business bring in? And that's a really great top level question, because then you can also, with each of these, they're all part of the sales funnel. And so you can say, okay, this worked or it did not work. Let me go one level up or one level down. Why did this work or not work? And what can I tweak, pivot, eliminate, add to get the result that I do want? And so, overall revenue for me in 2024 was not where I wanted it to be. Part of it is I did change my model. I'm sorry, I pivoted my offer in quarter four. So quarter four did not have revenue from my masterminds that I previously had. So that is something like, it's not where I wanted it to be at the beginning of the year, but living in the pivot where I am right now, I'm happy with the pivot that I did make, and it makes sense why the revenue numbers are where they are. um, if you are looking at a profit number and you're like, oh, I brought in $100,000, but it cost me $90,000 to run my business, or, I make this product and um, it brought in $20,000 this month, but my expenses were $22,000. Like, why is it costing me so much to make this product? Or when you're breaking apart your different offers, so like my mastermind versus my sales course versus um my notebooks, and I'm putting more effort into, part of the reason I did pivot is because my sales expended the energy I expended to sell for the mastermind was high. It had a cap, so like, as I was selling to more people, that meant a higher output of energy for me. And there was going to be a point where, like, I could only run so many of those at a time, and to sell out at my maximum capacity was just going to be not the lifestyle that I wanted to live. So that's why I created this course, because I think it will be able to help me scale more. So when I'm looking at my sales energy and how much energy am I expending to sell versus the revenue that I potentially hope to bring in 2025, is going to be a different ratio. So that's and I think that I like doing this one second, the micro analysis, because I can look at my outcomes, but then I can look at like my energy and I can marry those two and see what I want to do differently. Okay. So, revenue generated is not what I want it to be. I know why, and I know this is going to help me project the revenue that I want to make in 2025. Okay, so revenue generated. So stepping back from that, I'm looking at sales calls versus how many people signed up. So, how many sales calls did I have versus how many people signed up? Again, this is like my sales process. And so if you don't have sales calls, or maybe you are looking at, a vendor versus, or you own like a restaurant, or just, so the KPIs may vary um depending on your business. And so for me, it's like, okay, how many sales calls did I have versus how many clients signed up? My sales calls were low. And so while my conversion rate actually was pretty good, so how many people signed up was pretty good. My sales calls were really low. How many people I sat on a call with to describe what I offer, and then having putting that offer out to them. um, and so that is the part of the formula that you can switch. Some of the reason my sales calls were low, again, because I did pivot my offer. So I didn't offer any sales calls leading up to quarter 4. So then again, taking one step back from that, okay, my sales calls were low. What is feeding my sales calls, and how can I tweak that? And so I'm looking at the conversations I'm having on the different social media platforms, the different networking events that I'm going to, the different um, the emails that I'm sending out, the referrals that I'm asking for. So all the ways that I generate sales calls, how can I take a look at those KPIs and determine what is working and what isn't working, what I need to tweak. So looking at connections on LinkedIn, which was a focus that I had for this year. And so my connections went up by over 700 more connections than I had in January 1, which is good. Having a bigger audience on LinkedIn is great. Um, there were some months where I was really consistent in sending out my 30-ish new connections for the week, and there were some weeks where I was not great. Again, like in the macro level discussion, I really talked about my um my mental health and where I was this year, and um the up and down nature of the year for me, just in coming to terms with my diagnosis and understanding what that meant for me. And there were a lot of weeks where I had to give myself some more grace, which meant that some of these things did fall off. Oh, why is my nose running? So, taking a look at where I was at a macro level and understanding that means like, okay, so I went up by quite a bit, and that was really great. The next level of that is, what are the types of conversations I was having on LinkedIn to then generate more sales calls, which that's, I think, the biggest thing that did fall off is I got quite a few more connections. My conversion rate was pretty good. I liked the discussions that I was having in um, in the messages with people on LinkedIn, but I wasn't as consistent with my follow up as I could have been. And so that could be something, when I am kind of like having a hard time mental health wise, it's easier for me to sit down and go, I have a very uh, specific process that I can follow to create those connections. And so sending those messages out, or sending the requests out, is something that doesn't take a big mental load for me. Whereas like sending them the message and then continuing to follow up and then um seeing if there's an opportunity for a sales call takes more mental energy for me. And so on days when I'm struggling with my mental health, then those are the things that are going to fall off. And that was a big lesson for me. Like, I'm so glad that I learned that this year. And part of it is taking some of the shame out of it, because I'm not a bad business owner because I was working on my mental health. Now I can prioritize when I'm having a good mental health day, week, month. I can be more proactive when I am struggling. How can I press an automate button for myself to just support me in that area? Um so my LinkedIn connections definitely went up. New email subscribers. Ah, I forgot to grab that number. My email subscribers went up quite a bit. I don't have like a huge email following. I think um I'm anywhere between the like 5 and 600-ish, and I think at the beginning of the year I was around 350. So it went up quite a bit. And that is really exciting. I think when I started tracking like where they're coming from, I changed a couple freebies later in the year. And so I think my two freebies helped, and my social media interaction on Threads really helped. A lot of my threads recently have come in from Threads, which is really, really great. And so they're joining my virtual co working. I'm talking about my sales challenge and my sales freebie that I have to increase the number of prospects um, as a freebie. And so putting those out there, it was finally a freebie that really clicked. I've put a ton of like free PDFs out there for people to use, and I would get one or two here or there, but the virtual co-working has been going really well. We consistently have like a good group there, and we get a lot of stuff done, and we have really good conversation. And the sales challenge was something that resonated with people. So again, that was a Thomas Edison experiment, and I finally found the light bulb that lit up. So that's been really, really cool. So how many new email subscribers do you have? One thing, um, within the emails, you can dive deeper into, it depends on how you leverage your email list. If you do not have an email list and you take one thing away from this podcast, start your email list. Um, there are so many options out there. I use MailerLite. I love MailerLite. There's MailChimp, there's HubSpot, there's a million email providers that you can use that protects customers information. They have to opt in. Don't just go adding people to your email list. That is illegal. They have to opt into your email list, but start creating a place for them to opt in. Even if you don't put anything out there, create a MailerLite account and at least get that set up and put something on your website for people to sign up. Um, and so, it's just baby steps. But within the email, you can dive deeper into how many opens do you have? How many clicks do you have? How many people go to your website from your email? How many people buy from your website? So these are all things that you can dive deeper into. Again, it really depends on how you leverage your email list and how, like, just what type of relationship do you have with your email list. I don't sell a lot on my email list. It's more of like a nurturing type of um my like weekly emails are just more like thoughts from my brain. Hope this you found this helpful, and here's my podcast if you'd like to listen. And a lot of times the content that I'm sharing on the podcast is similar to the content that I'm sharing on with my email list, because some people like to read, some people like to listen, some people are like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you had a podcast. Why don't I click here?" So that's how I interact with my email list. Some people do sell more, or they drop coupons, or like, "Hey, I have this new launch," or whatever. So it does depend on how you interact with your email list, may change the KPIs that you look at. One of the things that I did for this that I do with this other company that I consult for is we take a look at the subject lines and if they're more question based, do we get more opens? If they have an emoji in them, do they get more opens? If they reference some competitors that our prospects um, have, do we get more opens? And so you can, again, you can get really, really great granular just depending on how much time you want to put into this. Um, and then from there, the next KPI is website traffic. If you're using, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, um, your email to drive people to your website, are those working? My unique traffic actually went up 63% this year, which was really cool. Like that was a really cool number. I use Wix as my website, so I was able to see from January 1 until now versus last year, how much did my website traffic go up? And it went up 63%, which is really cool. And I can see the tweaks that I am making based on where people came from, the tweaks that I am making, and just how much more active I was on social media throughout the year and having the freebies really work. I use the freebies to drive people to my website to gather their email address and then they get the PDF in their email. So I can see it all working and I can see with my email list going up, obviously that is going to mean that more people are going to my website. So it makes sense. Um I think those are all the KPIs that I took a look at, and then how they all kind of interact with each other, like ultimate end goal is to sell. And so, how much money are you bringing into your business? Take a step back from that. Okay, how many sales conversations are you having? Okay, take a step back from that. Okay, how are you marketing your business to have sales conversations? Okay, take a step back from that. Like what types of platforms are you utilizing to market your business? And so they're all interconnected. They're all little pieces of this puzzle, this formula that you can use to, at the end of the day, generate more money, more revenue, um, just more into your business. So, the last piece I want to share with you, and as you're thinking about and creating goals for next year, is applying the 80/20 rule to all of this. And so, I do have an episode on the 80/20 rule, but it's Pareto's rule of 80/20. And what it says is that 80% of your input, no, 20% of your input creates 80% of your output. And so there's a lot of things that we do that don't create a lot of output. And so as you're looking the input you have on your business, um, are there things that you can tweak, you could do more of? But better yet, what are the things that you can do that you can take off of your plate? What are things that you can say no to now because you've looked at the data and they're not producing the results that you want? Um, you know, for example, and I talk about this a lot in the 80/20 rule episode, like if you're going to networking meetings and they're miserable for you and you're not creating any revenue out of them, stop going to them. And this is not to say like, oh, I went to one meeting and no one bought for me and I had a horrible time, so never go to a networking meeting ever again. Maybe you need to change the type of networking groups that you're going to. Um, but if you really put effort in and say, okay, I went to two networking groups a month throughout the year, and it literally generated no business, and I didn't enjoy going. There are a lot of networking events that I go to not to generate business, but because it fills my cup. Um, and so if I'm going to them to generate revenue and I'm not doing that, I can take that off of my plate. So, taking a look at all these KPIs can really help you. And then applying the 80/20 rule can help you think about what types of activities you want to take on to a daily, weekly, monthly basis in 2025. Um, and I hope that as you were going through this process, you did not should shame yourself, you did not judge yourself. You leave like looking at all of this through the lens of Thomas Edison and figuring out like if you found out ways that things did not work, that is a win. That's a huge win. Like that's amazing for a couple of reasons because now A, you can take that off of your plate, and B, you had the gumption to put yourself out in a way having no idea if it was going to work or not, which is that says so much about you. Like putting yourself out there in that way, it deserves like the biggest round of applause, the biggest cheers. Like, um, one of the things that I really like to do, actually, I have it hanging in my office, but it talks about it's Theodore Roosevelt's. Uh, it's not a quote because it's a lot of sentences, so I don't know exactly what to call it. Um, but it's called The Man in the Arena. And if you have never read it, go give it a read, especially as you're analyzing last year, thinking about goals for next year. The Man in the Arena by Theodore Roosevelt. I first heard about it from Brene Brown. And every time I read it, especially when I'm just in kind of like a shame spiral or being like, what the F am I doing? Like, it really just helps me remember that I'm fighting the good fight and that in that fight that you're going to get bruised, you're going to get cut up, you're going to get um you're going to have battle scars. And if anybody is jeering you from the nosebleeds, give him a big middle finger and an F you. He doesn't say that obviously, but the point is that don't take criticism from people that are in the cheap seats. Because they're not the ones out there doing the dirty work day in and day out, and we are. Um, I hope this was helpful. I hope hearing about some of the KPIs that I talked about gives you some inspiration, gives you motivation to reflect back on your own journey this past year and then how you're going to take it into next year. And so, if it was helpful, I would love if you would share with one or two people that are also in the arena and could use some of this macro and micro level analysis for their business. That would mean the world to me. So, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life. Happy, happy holidays. Oh, I didn't stop.